So we've got about 12 minutes left. We'd like to do some question and answer. If you're online or if you're in here in person, if you have any questions, please jump in there.
I have a question.
So everybody, one of the things that I'm wondering and may be useful is for those of us on the other side of the aisle, the research side, do you have any questions for us? You have one of the world's most well-respected narcotic researchers sitting in front of you, and Dr. Mike Bardo. Dr. Bardo and I recently finished a grant funded by the Department of Defense looking at a new class of medications that may be useful in treating narcotic abuse. So I'm just wondering if there's anything you might want to ask of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're curious about what does collaboration in that respect look like? What could it look like? What does it look like in the past? Have there been efforts like that? I mean, and if we need to do another meeting to discuss that, we're happy to do that too. But I think that was one of our main goals in coming today, was learning more about what that collaboration can look like. You know, how do we...
Mike, can we put you on the spot?
Well, I'm curious about medications. I know so there's a pamphlet I think you referred to about medications that some members could use or not use. What's your let's get put some heat on the bones. What about somebody who comes into the program on methadone or Suboxone or naltrexone, and naltrexone being not addictive? Are there strict guidelines in membership?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. We get it almost every time, and our answer has evolved over the years. And so first off, membership is always about whether somebody wants to stop using. They can be an NA member whether they actually have stopped using or not. And, you know, I think the thing about medication specifically that treats addiction itself, that's a different approach than NA takes. Doesn't mean that we're against it. It just means that it's a different approach. And I was thinking about this morning. When we look at how you treat a patient or a member, you know, a medication or abstinence itself is only one tool in the large program of either approach. You know, and if I get out of line here, you know, just stop me. But most professional programs that I understand where they use medication is there's usually a counselor, there's group sessions, you know, there's mentorship, there's community, there's opportunities to be together with other people of similar thing. And so, you know, that's an entire program. And, you know, and in Narcotics Anonymous, you know, Ron described like our program, abstinence is a part of it, but it's only one tool in a whole large goal, which is change and recovery. And so it's just different. It doesn't mean that it's bad or it's not right. It's just a different approach. And so, you know, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, about that, because I don't know. We would have to think more about what you were saying about, because if you're researching a particular medication, you know, how could we discuss that? I'm not certain, but I do know on the psychological aspect, the psychology, mental health, we have a whole lot in common. And because we're talking about, yeah, here comes the construction equipment and helicopters. And I don't know if you all heard the helicopter earlier. There was a helicopter. But there's a lot of common ground in that respect. And so I think that we probably should sit down, have another meeting, and look at where is the common ground that is okay for us to talk about, where we're both able to keep our approach to what we're doing and stay true to that, if that makes sense. Mark, was that helpful?
What I think is, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, is that helpful?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things I think that's unique, well, one of the many things that's unique about our program here at Kentucky, one is our long history of collaborating with folks in government and elsewhere, studying the opiate pandemic. epidemic, well, pandemic. But in our graduate program, our faculty and our grad students examine and study narcotic use and addiction from a variety of different perspectives. And so I thought it might be useful to share that with you. Some of us do cellular work with narcotics and other addicting substances. Some do rat and mouse work, like Dr. Bardo does, studying how animals, as models of human behavior, how animals, quote unquote, like narcotics. And then we also have a couple of groups that study human subjects in the hospital setting. And again, it's not necessarily strict. We're not, our perspective is not, let's give a medicine and then we'll fix everything. Absolutely not. Like we've seen with the treatment of alcohol dependence, medication with intensive psychological activities and commitments like you folks are talking about is clearly the best way to help people abstain from relapse. So I think there's a lot of complementarity there. Now, we tend to be more heavy on the biomedical side, but we do have folks in our program, faculty and grad students, who are studying the judgment and decision-making side of drug self-administration in animals and humans. So, you know, it's not we're going to give a med and we're going to fix everything at all. It's how to, and Josh Beckman is the professor who's running a lot of this work, and so is Michael Wesley. They're using both animals and humans. They're studying how humans and animals judge the value of drug X, Y, or Z versus an alternative reinforcer like socialization. And so there's a lot of overlap between what we study at several levels and what you folks do at a psychological level. And that's what I think it's so cool to have you folks come talk to us, because we don't get to see the application of our science. And that's what you brought to us today, which has really been a gift. So thank you all very, very much for that.
Yeah, you can't see it, but I got a big smile. You know,
Good.
I think something that we understand about ourselves is that we are at the far end of the spectrum, you know, and we understand that. You know, we're a program of, you know, our approach is complete abstinence. We have these steps that we follow. We have these traditions that kind of guide our groups and these service efforts. And we realize that we're way far over on one side. And, you know, we have 70, 60 something years of experience. We have members that have been around that long that are still alive, you know, that can share their experiences from the 1960s and 70s. And I mean, I know them, people on the screen here know these people, and they're willing to talk to people. So it's just, I think this is a great conversation starter about, you know, what do we have to offer as far as what you were asking. We have something to offer. We just need to sit down and talk about it and figure out how can we put it out in the open. And I know that we have another question in the back. I want to make sure that we get to that. So please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, sure. So when we reference to drug addiction when we're writing, we use like human first language, as in like a person with a substance use disorder. And I've noticed that you guys in Narcotics Anonymous identify as addicts, not like I'm a person with a substance use disorder. Why do you think, is that like beneficial to you guys? Why do you think there's a difference in the way we talk about it? Is that, do you like the way we say?
Well, I'm really grateful that you asked that question, because it's a very important point. And it was something that I referenced in my PowerPoint, is that, you know, our message, if you read it, is that any addict can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And so there are these behaviors after we stop using that are still not beneficial and can cause us a lot of harm. And so that's why we don't say specifically substance use disorder or MOUD or any of those very specific things, because they take away that generality that keeps us all united. I mean, you know, we're fine if somebody comes in and says, you know, I'm substance use, you know, I mean, I've been clean 16 years. So I remember, you know, I've seen a lot of different terminology change over the years, but no, it's fine, you know. But that's why we use the word addict too, is that, you know, we have people that you know, we gamble and we have these, exactly what we've been talking about, is these behavior tendencies to overuse or overstimulate a normal human behavior. You know, I don't know why it is my sister can go out and drink on the weekends. She's my sister, same DNA, everything. She can go out, drink on the weekends, get up, go. She can have 1 or 2 beers, whatever. That's not me. I have a physical allergy, And so that's why we describe it the way that we describe it. And we use that term addict. And people do say things to us. They have over the years. They've, you know, most recently we've encountered a lot of big change in, we've seen in the public about stigma and language. And that's understandable, you know, when we get it. But that's why, you know, the quote that was in the PowerPoint, I mean, that was from 1965. We've been using the word clean since 1953. You know, and so when somebody asks us, you know, why do you use the word clean? Well, we created a definition for what that meant, and we've stuck to that definition since our inception in 1953. If people take that word and they use it in a different context, there's not really anything we can do about that. We don't have any control over that. All we can do is say, hey, you know what it means when you're an addict to us? It just means that you have an allergy to drugs. It doesn't mean that you're a needle junkie or you're living on the street or anything. It just means that you can't use drugs successfully. And so when we say that to people, they go, oh, okay, well, I kind of had this idea that it was, you know, what you hear. And no, that's just not what it means to us. And so that's why we have all of these pamphlets and things like that. Does anybody online want to, was that helpful? Sorry? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that, about both those things, actually. On the one about the language, when we were developing our own basic text, goes all the way back to the early 80s. We standardized our language because there were so many ways that, you know, different professional members of the professional community would refer to us different ways. And then over the years, the sort of, you know, the vicissitudes of how you refer to what we call an addict change. There's a new way, you know, and our literature is our literature, and in some ways our approach is to bring about this deep surrender. You know, there's nothing sort of well, it bring about this deep surrender, and we don't soft pedal it at all. You know, I am an addict, and there's power in this language, and there's power in this kind of surrender. So we don't also pretend that we're all things to all people, or that we are the right approach to prevention programs, or we're the right approach to harm reduction programs or whatever. Our deal is deep surrender, working these steps, total freedom from addiction. And that's only going to apply to some subset of the people that you're treating, because not everybody's up for that, you know. So some of our language, some of our commitment to total abstinence and bringing about what that brings about, and not substituting one drug for another, as we say, but treating that condition that comes about in this total surrender. I think somewhere in there is the answer to both of those two questions. And so then our challenge is, how do we then work in the best cooperative way and find the common ground with people who are doing things a bit differently than we do. And we are very committed to doing that. It's just a matter of doing it honestly, you know, being honest about where the kind of conflict between this approach and this approach is. A total abstinence approach and an approach that uses a drug from what it looks like to some of us, sort of satisfy the addiction on some level. You know, that this is kind of, there's a fundamental conflict there, and you hear it mostly from people who've been down that path, people who've been on those kinds of medications, and say, once they get off them, they say, no, I was not clean at that time. I mean, it's a challenge, it's a big internal challenge for us to reconcile these two worlds.
Yeah, Shane, can I add real quickly to that about the perspective on the word addict and me identifying myself as that, is that there's a direct correlation between that and our first step and some of the things that you and Ron just said. And I understand the stigma. I had the same stigma and misconception of what that meant when I came to NA. And just the fact today that I can identify myself as an addict within the bounds of our meetings and with other people, it helps. It's that paradox that you spoke about earlier on. It helps to demystify some of that for myself, and it helps to take some of the stigma I had for myself as it relates to that. So me identifying myself as an addict is actually part of my spiritual awakening and part of my own healing that comes from that. Again, within the bounds of our meetings, and being able to also be able to share that with someone else as a way of identification for people and a way of empathy for other people. So.
All right, I'm going to add something
Thanks.
real quick, and then we're going to go to Wolvina because she's got her hand up. But I think it's important that when we bring up the word medication, that we adequately explain, that there's a scope that Narcotics Anonymous has in what we do. We're not a mental health organization, so we don't. When we're talking about abstinence, we're not talking about mental health medication. We're not talking about pain medication for surgeries. We're not talking about blood pressure medicine that could be mood or mind altering. And this is where we get in trouble a lot in the community, but it's the reality is that we're only talking about drugs to treat addiction, because we treat addiction with abstinence and then the process of the 12 steps. But what's tricky is something that Mike brought up, Dr. Bardo, as he said, he was talking about particular addiction medications that are not mood or mind altering, right? I think, is it Vivitrol, and so there's these other things, right, that don't fit the mold of what an addict would use, right? But if you're still taking a substance to put inside your body to keep you from using something else or to help you mentally, that's kind of in conflict with, we admitted we were powerless and that now we don't have to use it anymore because now we believe that we are powerless. We understand as long as I don't take it, I'm going to be okay. And so that's where it's a long conversation, and you have to have all this stuff and visual aids, but it is patient. You have to have patience. But I just wanted to say that, and Wolvina, please go ahead.
Thanks for recognizing me, Shane. My name is Wolvina, and I do public relations as part of the Northeast Zone, and specifically in the Manhattan area. And I wanted to address the question about the identification of the word addict as well. In the Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship, identifying ourselves as addicts is also part of our own self-admission. It's part of an acknowledgement of our personal problem. And in the medical field, there's diagnosis that happens externally. So we don't diagnose each other in Narcotics Anonymous. Basically, our strength is our shared experience. So when you talk about people who are on medically assisted treatment, we have years of experience with members who have come into our fellowship on a variety of medically assisted treatment protocols, and our experiences that they have gotten clean in our fellowship, and that the issue with acknowledging our own personal responsibility and our fellowship is having the step work address our issues of shame, guilt, and remorse through that step work process. And that the other experience that we have is part of community support. I know that in the state of New Jersey, where addicts are mandated to Narcotics Anonymous meetings for 5 years in drug court, it's the benefit of our fellowship and our shared experience, our 24-hour access and support to members who can share these experiences of what it's like when you're in those different phases of medication, detox, abstinence, and how that whole process was completed. So I'm just going to end it there, but I wanted to just add that that's part of the strength of our program, and that we do have numbers supporting those kind of experiences, with Narcotics Anonymous being an adjunct to treatment.
Thanks, Wolvina. All right, we've got to close the meeting. Everybody's got stuff they got to go do. So I'm going to be around if anybody has any more questions. Thank you to everyone online. We'll check in with all of you soon, and we'll make sure that you all get all of our contact information. Thank you.